Live from the CES show floor, I am joined by my colleague and boss, Dr. Jeff Laux, Jana Arbanis, Senior Client Leader in Media and Entertainment. We have a consumer survey, the Connected Consumer Survey, that dropped just a month ago, and we're going to be taking a look at how it's applicable to the trends here at CES. Jeff, last year we saw weak smartphone sales, we saw weak computer sales, and our Connected Consumer Survey showed that that was a thing in the past, but might be about to change.
That's right, Duncan. This year's Connected Consumer Survey shows that consumers are in a better financial position to be buying new devices. Now, the average household spends about $765 per year on connected devices. And those are the sorts of things we see on the floor. Smartphones, PCs, tablets, but also healthcare wearables, smart TVs, and smart home. What we're seeing this year is that about 30% of respondents say they're going to be spending more on that technology this year. Previous year was only 10%, so there's more of a willingness to buy. There's one other data point that I think is really interesting. There's a lot of pent-up demand right now. Last year, 50% of consumers said they're holding off on big tech purchases. This year, it's in half, about 25%. So there's more willingness to buy, and there's pent-up demand. And finally, there's just more willingness to buy premium products. And when we think about the technology that the tech companies want to get into people's hands, that usually comes with a bigger price tag.
Now, hardware is back, baby, but hardware on its own doesn't do much. We've got a whole software and applications layer. Jana, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think technology, is really critical to people's lives, and consumers are all in on technology services that make their lives better and make them more simple. I certainly believe in that. We know actually from our survey that the average household is spending about $175 a month already on software and services and subscriptions. And I think when you take those services that people value already and add Gen AI, they're going to be even better. The willingness to spend will go up even further. So I do think Gen AI is going to continue to accelerate consumer demand.
And that's what we call a segue, because my next question is about Gen AI. So I was here last year, and the comment we made is AI is everywhere. I'm back this year. We mean it this year. It's really every single booth. But as part of our Connected Consumer Survey, we did ask questions about Gen AI inside products and what that was likely to do. So Jeff, can you walk us through the survey and some of what you've seen here on the show floor?
Well, there's a lot of interest in generative AI and how it can make people's lives better, and that's translating to devices. So around a third of our consumers in the survey said that they would be interested in buying a device faster than they normally would to get Gen AI inside. And that was consistent across smartphones, PCs, and tablets. When we look at smartphones in particular for the coming year, we did a TMT prediction on that. We think there's going to be a modest bump in smartphone sales because of this, driven largely by Gen Z and millennials. When I think about what I've seen on the show floor, I think that there are a lot of incremental improvements that Gen AI can make today that are going to get people to want to buy those devices. And I was thinking about my son Dominic, who is in his first year of university. You spend a lot of money on tuition. You want to make sure your kids are best positioned as possible. Well, one of the laptops can record a lecture, transcribe it, and summarize it. And so my son can end up taking notes, focusing on what's most important to him and not miss anything. And so, a small premium on a laptop for a note-taking buddy that might make him more successful, that sounds pretty good to me.
So for a little context, our prediction is that half of all laptops this year that are sold will in fact have these Gen AI chips inside them. So it's pretty soon it's going to be hard finding one that doesn't have it. But Jeff was giving us kind of an example of an application or a use case. In the real world, consumers are interested not just in those, but in experiences. How do you see Gen AI driving the experience angle?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, I really think it's all about how Gen AI can simplify people's lives, both workers and consumers, and really take sort of the busyness, the busy work, the complexity out of their daily lives. So for instance, I'm in the midst of planning a spring break trip for my family, and it's going to take me hours, right, to triangulate hotels and airlines and activities and those things. What if I had a smart AI chat bot or an agent, right, that I gave sort of my preferences and desires, and it triangulated for me across trusted sources, across different websites, airline availability, hotel availability, and created an itinerary that was customized to me. That would be really valuable to me, and I think about like sort of my daily life and how I want to spend my time, but also a rich experience that I want to get on the other side. So actually that was talked about last night as a keynote, a major travel company talking about how they're going to enable that experience. So I think it's a great example of how that'll impact consumers' daily lives. Now, the one thing with that, to make these agents as smart as possible, I'm going to need to share some information with them. I'm going to need to talk about the ages of my children, what they enjoy, what I enjoy, perhaps provides credit card information, the like. That creates real privacy concerns. So I think when companies think about how they're going to create these experiences, they need to put trust at the center and ensure that they're enabling that trusted experience for consumers.
And Jeff, you and I, we were talking about this. We're seeing that happening in real time on the show floor, but we also have some survey data that amplifies that talks about the issue of trust around AI. Why don't you walk us through the survey, what you saw on the floor, and I've got a thought on that one.
So one of the things that's really interesting about trust is that it's a competitive advantage for tech companies. We found in our Connected Consumer Survey that when consumers trust technology, they buy 50% more than they would otherwise. And so if you're one of those trusted tech companies, they're going to buy your device. So it's important for competitive advantage. But there's also something around, like, what do we mean by trust? Certainly, as Jana mentioned, we need to have trust around the data and the device that we're using. But trust is also broader than that. And as we were walking the show floor, we were seeing artificial intelligence being described not only as useful or beneficial, but even as affectionate and kind. And so they're trying to break down some of these trust barriers by showing that if you share this data, if you share your lives, you're going to end up having those useful experiences and those good experiences, like the travel one that you just mentioned, Jeremy.
There was a conversation I had where every technology in the world kind of, in last year at CES, it's, we've got Gen AI. Next year, nobody's going to even talk about it because it's going to be buried inside every single product. We're in the convincing year. No, it's not evil, it's good, it's your friend, it's helpful. So, Jana, where do you see the whole trust and privacy and security? It's a big issue. There's a lot of gaps out there.
Yeah.
How do you see technology companies addressing those trust and privacy concerns?
Yeah, and I think it's a great point because we also don't have like the regulation behind it, so there's not clarity and consistency relative to how companies are addressing this. From my vantage point, I think it's all about being really clear, really transparent with users, giving them user-friendly ways to understand how data is being collected, how data is being used, how data is being protected through that experience, and then checking in with that user. Jeff used the word affectionate. What if as I was engaging with the experience, the agent was reinforcing what I needed to do and saying, hey, have you thought about this? Don't forget you've allowed to enable your location sharing. Do you still want to do that? And have somebody feeling like they're actually looking out for me, as opposed to me feeling like I need to hunt for that information to make sure that I feel comfortable. So I think enabling privacy and transparency as part of the experience will actually make consumers feel that trust. And as Jeff said, on the experience side too, the more you trust these providers, the more experiences you'll want to engage in.
Now, one of the things, not from the connected, I'm shifting gears slightly. We have a report called Predictions, and we talked about generative AI and women specifically. There is a gender gap when it comes to the adoption and interest in generative AI. Jana?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would say, there's a long history, unfortunately, Duncan, of, gender bias in innovation and technology, dating back to, the creation of seatbelts. These things were built for men by men, and really leaving women with a less than desirable outcome. And so I think that when I think about Gen AI and I see this gap, right, we see a gap in terms of interest, of engaging with Gen AI enabled experiences, and we see a gap in trust. Women only about 18% of women have high degree of trust that providers are, taking care of their data, whereas men are at 31%. So there's a real gap, and that gap in trust and that gap in interest, impedes women from actually engaging with AI. And therefore, as the models are trained, they're being trained largely on men and men's preferences, and they actually become less and less relevant for women. And so I think what I would say about that is that, we absolutely need to have more diversity, specifically gender diversity, in the design of these tools, and that the focus on the design is designing for diversity, right? With a thought around the diversity of the population that they're trying to serve. And I think that needs to happen now, because I'm worried, on the other side of this a few years from now, it becomes too late, and women kind of are again not left with a satisfying experience because the models have been trained, not on a diverse population.
One of my favorite stats from the prediction is that although there was a gap in general among tech women who worked in technology, they were actually using and adopting Gen AI faster than the men. So there's a real sign of optimism there that this gender gap will narrow or maybe even flip over time. Now, my favorite part is always, here we are at CES, there's a lot of toys, we're here in Vegas. What would be your sort of most interesting category, something that you would like to, what would you fit back in your carry-on to bring back home?
Right. Well, so one of the things that I struggle with is I've probably got about 8 apps on my phone that control my home remotely, and like seeing who's at the front door, unlocking a door for someone, turning on the heat, what have you. And that's frustrating to me. I have seen some stuff here that bring that all together. And again, to have a home agent who I can go into one portal and be able to access all of the devices and be able to control different aspects of my home. So I'm super excited about the advancements being made in smart home.
Awesome. Jeff, what's your toy for the kids, for the cat? What are you bringing home?
Well, Jana and I also work on digital media trends, which talks about how people are interacting with technology. And one of the biggest frustrations that people have with streaming services and with their TV experience in general is that they can't get good recommendations, and they can't find things among their different subscriptions. So I've got about 8 different subscriptions. I've got to go into all of them to find what I want. And then when the whole family's sitting down, it can sometimes be hard to pick something, almost like it was when you're going to Blockbuster, right? And everyone's got to pick a video. Well, we're starting to see smart TVs that have got Gen AI built in, where you can query them, you can ask what's available, and hopefully they can end up even having recommendations and things like that. So I'm really hopeful that Gen AI is going to be a big part of our viewing and streaming experience moving forward. I think we're seeing signs.
That's my own personal one is actually laundry. Not that this is relevant to my experience, but looking up washing machine instructions in Hebrew when I'm on the road was surprisingly difficult. And I actually saw a thing on the floor that was a multilingual figure it out. Duncan does not need to be Googling exactly how to turn the machine on. So here we are at CES talking about connected consumer. Thanks for joining us, Jana. Thanks for joining us, Jeff. Glad you could be here. We will be back next year with more survey, more toys, and I'm willing to bet more Gen AI.